Go to Zurich, the man said at my father's graveside. Tell them his name, they'll know what to do. I remember the cold more than anything else. It came off Lake Ontario that morning and moved through Beechwood Cemetery like it had always belonged there, bending the small Canadian flags planted beside the grey stones. There were only 2 people within sight, a groundskeeper near the tree line, and the man standing in front of me, white hair, straight posture, eyes that hadn't softened in probably 60 years. My father had been in the ground for 40 minutes. No reception afterward. No long line of people with casseroles and condolences. Just me. A folded flag and a name newly carved into stone. My father was a retired Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry soldier. He did 2 tours in Bosnia in the 90s. He never talked about either of them. Growing up in Kingston, Ontario, I knew his rank the way I knew his coffee order, black, no sugar, every morning at 5:45, not because he told me, but because some things in our house were just fixed facts. He worked part-time at a hardware store after he left the forces. Said he liked the weight of things that actually held. He never mentioned Bosnia to me once. Not the cities, not the weather, not a single name. When he died, it was a stroke. Sudden, clean in the way strokes rarely are. His neighbor Margaret called me because he hadn't collected his mail in 2 days. I was at my desk in Toronto finishing a report for the municipal planning office where I worked. I put the phone down and stared at my monitor for a long time, not fully understanding the shape of what had just changed. His house in Kingston was small and paid off. His truck was 12 years old. His savings, from what I could see, were modest. My brother Callum flew in from Vancouver the same evening I arrived. He stood in the kitchen doorway looking at everything the way someone does when they're quietly calculating. He kept things simple, Callum said. It wasn't a compliment. We didn't fight that night. We were too tired. But something in his tone stayed with me, not grief exactly, more like a ledger being opened. The burial at Beechwood was 2 days later. The military honors were brief and precise. A chaplain, a rifle party, the flag folded and handed to me with both hands. Callum stood to my left. He cried, which surprised me. Whatever his calculations were, the loss was still real. It was after the chaplain left that the man approached. He walked from the direction of the older section of the cemetery, unhurried, wearing a dark coat with no insignia visible. He looked to be in his mid-70s. He didn't introduce himself by rank. I only noticed the veteran's pin when he got close enough to shake my hand. I served with your father, he said, in Sarajevo, 95. My father had never mentioned his name. He didn't say more about that. He looked at the headstone for a moment. The way you look at something you've been expecting to see for a long time. Go to Zurich, he said. Tell them his name. They'll know what to do. He pressed a card into my palm. Cream-colored, no logo. A phone number with a Swiss country code, and a surname written in blue ink. Before I could say a single word, he nodded once, turned, and walked away between the rows of stones until I couldn't see him anymore. Callum had been talking to the chaplain 20 meters away. He didn't see any of it. I didn't tell him. That evening I drove back to my father's house alone. The place still smelled like wood shavings and the particular soap he'd used since I was a child. His boots were on the mat by the door. His mug was upside down on the drying rack. Nothing about the kitchen suggested that the man who used it had any connection to Switzerland. I opened every drawer I could find. Hardware receipts. Tax returns going back to 2004. An old Canadian Tire warranty for a drill he'd bought in 2011. Everything ordinary, everything it accounted for. I was about to stop when I found the box. It was in his bedroom closet, on the shelf behind his winter jackets, inside a canvas bag from a Canadian Forces surplus sale. A shoebox, sealed with a rubber band that had lost most of its elasticity. Inside, his expired passport and a newer one issued in 2019. I opened the newer one. The stamps told a story I had never been given a chapter of. Zurich twice, Basel once, Geneva. A trip to Frankfurt that connected through Zurich. Dates going back 11 years. Trips that happened during weeks I remembered as ordinary. A week he said he was going fishing near Frontenac. A long weekend he mentioned as a Veterans Association meeting in Ottawa. I sat on the edge of his bed for a long time. Callum called that night. His tone was already shifting toward practical. The house needs an assessment, he said. I've been looking at what comparable properties in Kingston are going for. He's been gone 4 days, I said. I'm not saying sell immediately. I'm saying we should know what we're dealing with. There was something under those words that I recognized. Callum had always been bright, and always been unlucky, or more precisely, he'd made choices that required luck he didn't have. A restaurant partnership in Vancouver that dissolved badly. A real estate investment he'd gotten into 18 months too late. Dad had helped him once, quietly, without making it a story. I'd been there when he transferred the money. Callum never acknowledged it directly. He just moved on. The way people do when they don't want to be in debt to their fathers. There's not much there, I told him. The house and not much else. Okay, he said, and I heard the flatness of someone recalibrating. I didn't mention the passport. I didn't mention the card. That night I looked at the Swiss number for a long time before I dialed. A woman answered on the third ring. Precise English. Neutral accent. I gave her my father's name. The pause that followed was longer than a wrong number, shorter than confusion. Then, yes, we have been expecting your call. My heart didn't speed up. It seemed to slow, the way things do when something large becomes suddenly real. She asked when I could come to Zurich. I said I would need time to arrange things. Of course, she said. When you come, please bring government identification and the death certificate. We will take care of the rest. No mention of amounts. No mention of what the rest even was. Just calm expectation, like a train departure that had been scheduled years ago. The next morning I went through the house again, more carefully. A locked cabinet in the basement that I'd always assumed held tools. A small fireproof safe tucked behind the water heater that I had genuinely never noticed before. My father had not lived carelessly. He had lived with intention. Those are different things. Callum texted around noon. Let me know when the lawyer is available. I can drive down. I wrote back that I would let him know. I booked a flight to Zurich that afternoon. I didn't tell anyone. The flight from Toronto was 9 hours overnight. I had a window seat and didn't sleep. I thought about the years I'd taken for granted the Sunday dinners he never canceled, the way he'd shown up when my apartment flooded 2 winters ago without me having to ask, the drives back to Kingston where we'd talked about nothing much, and I'd thought that was enough. It had been enough. I just hadn't understood it correctly. I thought about Bosnia. About what a 24-year-old from Kingston does in Sarajevo in 1995, what he sees, what he carries home folded up inside him for 30 years. He'd never burdened me with any of it. When I landed, Zurich felt nothing like I'd imagined. I'd expected grandeur. What I found was a city that worked trams running exactly on schedule, streets clean and quietly purposeful. The address the woman had given me was a short walk from the main station. The building was old stone, unmarked except for a small brass number beside the door. No bank signage, no lobby full of wealth signaling itself. Inside, a receptionist made a quiet call. Within minutes, a man in his 50s came to meet me. Dark suit, unhurried, the kind of calm that comes from having done something for a long time. Miss Carver, he said. I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a man of great consistency. That word consistency caught me off guard. Not bravery, not service, consistency. You knew him? I asked. Professionally, yes. For 14 years. He led me to a private meeting room. The table was old wood, the chairs solid. He opened a folder and set it between us. My father had established a trust in 2010. Not under his own name alone, structured through a Canadian holding vehicle with Swiss management, which was why it appeared nowhere in his Kingston paperwork. The contributions had been regular, disciplined, unspectacular individually, substantial collectively. The investments were conservative government bonds, dividend equities, nothing volatile. This can't be right, I said, looking at the summary page. It is correct, the man said. He worked at a hardware store. Part-time. He also received a disability pension from Veterans Affairs Canada, a small inheritance from his mother in 2009, and he made consistent contributions over 14 years. I looked at the number again. Just over $9 million Canadian. $9 million. My father had driven a 12-year-old truck and reused plastic bags. What was it for? I asked. The man folded his hands. Your father designated the trust to support 3 purposes. First, direct financial assistance to former CF members experiencing medical costs not covered by Veterans Affairs, particularly mental health treatment and long-term care. Second, bursaries for the children of veterans killed or seriously injured in service. Third, a family stabilization clause for his immediate family, under specific conditions he defined himself. I stared at the table. He never said a word. He was insistent on that. He felt that announcing help changed the nature of it. And me? You are the successor trustee. The trust cannot be dissolved, redirected, or materially altered without your consent and a review by a 3-person oversight committee. The room felt smaller, not in a bad way, in the way of something with actual walls. Are there people receiving support right now? Yes. 11 active cases. 2 families with children in post-secondary education, 4 individuals in treatment, others receiving periodic assistance. He slid an envelope across the table. Your father left this to be given in person, upon first visit. My phone buzzed in my bag. I already knew it was Callum. I let it ring. The envelope was plain white, my name on the front in my father's handwriting block letters, no unnecessary curves. Inside, a single page, written by hand on ruled paper. If you're reading this, then I didn't find the right time to tell you in person. I kept looking for it. I'm sorry I ran out. My throat closed. I don't want you to think this was a secret I kept out of pride. I kept it because money changes how people see things, and I didn't want you to see me differently until after I was gone and it was too late for it to affect anything between us. I hope you understand that. There are people who came home from the same places I came home from and didn't have what I had. I had you. I had a house. I had time to heal. Not everyone did. I just tried to make sure that mattered. You don't make noise about helping someone. You just help them. I trust you to know what to do with what I've left. That trust is not a burden. It is the most honest thing I know how to say to you. Be steady. Love, Dad. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I answered Callum's call. What did the lawyer say? He asked. I'm still going through things, I said. It's more complicated than I expected. A pause. Complicated how? There's a trust, I said. Dad set one up. Years ago. Silence on his end. How much? He said finally. I looked at the number on the page in front of me. I'll explain everything when I'm back, I said. He didn't press further. He knew me well enough to know I wasn't going to be rushed. On the flight home, I reread my father's letter twice. The line that stayed with me was not the largest one. It was the small admission tucked near the end. I kept looking for the right time because it meant he'd wanted to tell me. He just hadn't known how to hand something that large to someone he loved without it changing the weight between them. I understood that more than I expected to. Callum drove down to Kingston 2 days after I landed. He didn't text first. I heard his car in the driveway and watched through the kitchen window as he sat for a moment before getting out, not hesitating. Exactly, just composing. He came in and sat at the kitchen table where my father had done his crosswords every Sunday morning. Tell me what you found, he said. I walked him through it. Not the way the trust manager had walked me through it. I didn't have a folder or professional distance. I just explained it plainly. The structure, the purpose, the people it was already helping, the amount. When I said the number, he looked at the table. 9 million, he repeated. Yes, and he stopped. Started again. He helped me out 6 years ago. 50,000. I always thought that was him at the limit of what he had. It wasn't. Callum was quiet for a long moment. Why didn't he tell me? He told me in a letter. He thought money changed how people saw things. He didn't want it to change things between him and us. Did it work? Callum asked quietly. I thought about it honestly. I don't know yet. He looked up then. Are you the trustee? Yes. I watched him process that. I knew what was coming and I didn't try to preempt it. He'd always needed to arrive at his own conclusions. So I get nothing, he said. It wasn't angry, just flat, the word of someone identifying a category. There's a family stabilization clause, I said. Dad included it deliberately. It allows structured distributions to immediate family, with conditions. Conditions. Financial counseling. A documented repayment plan for existing debt. Distributions tied to progress, not lump sum. Callum looked at me with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite hurt. You want to manage me. Dad wanted to protect what he built, I said. So do I. Same thing. No, I said. It isn't. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, my father's truck sat exactly where it always had. He left me the conditions and you the authority, Callum said. He left you a door, I said. It has a handle. You can choose whether to open it. He turned around. And if I consult my own lawyer? That's your right, I said. The trust is valid under both Swiss and Canadian law. It's been structured for 14 years. But you can absolutely consult a lawyer. He left without finishing his coffee. He did consult a lawyer. A week later, I received a formal letter from a firm in Vancouver requesting full disclosure of the trust structure and questioning whether proper disclosure had been made under British Columbia succession law. The language was careful and cold and made our family sound like a transaction. I hired a lawyer in Kingston named Patricia Osei. Calm, thorough, former Department of Justice. She read through everything in one sitting. "Your father was meticulous," she said. "He was consistent," I said, using the word the Swiss banker had used. "It had been sitting in me since Zurich. This will hold," she said. "Your brother's claim has limited grounds. The trust predates any inheritance expectation by over a decade, and it was disclosed in your father's will by reference. Non-itemized but disclosed." "He'll push it," I said. "Probably. That's normal. Let him." The hearing was at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice in Kingston. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, the ordinary architecture of places where important things get decided without pageantry. Callum sat at the table opposite me and didn't make eye contact at first. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping. His lawyer argued that the trust structure had effectively circumvented Callum's equitable claim as a dependent who had received financial support from our father, that it created an implied expectation. Patricia responded that implied expectations were not legal instruments, that the trust was properly constituted, and that Callum had received substantial support during our father's lifetime, which was documented and relevant. At the second hearing, the veteran from the cemetery appeared. He came in quietly and sat behind me without announcement until Patricia called him. He had submitted a written statement beforehand, but the judge had requested his presence. He said he had known my father since 1995. He said my father had been the kind of man whose word you built things on. He described how the idea for the trust came about not dramatically, not from a single moment, but from years of noticing what fell through the cracks for men who came back from overseas carrying things the country never formally acknowledged. He said my father had not wanted recognition, he had wanted results. Callum's lawyer tried to suggest that the veteran's relationship with my father had created undue influence over the trust's design. The veteran waited for the question to finish. "Your father designed that trust himself," he said. "He asked for my witness signature. That was the extent of my involvement. He knew exactly what he was building." The judge dismissed Callum's petition 3 weeks later. Procedurally, quietly, without drama. Outside the courthouse, Callum stood by his car. He looked at the ground for a moment before he looked at me. "You didn't bend," he said. "No." Even knowing I'd lose publicly, "I didn't want you to lose anything," I said. "I wanted you to see what he actually built." Callum exhaled. $9 million, and he drove that truck. He liked that truck. Something in Callum shifted, then not softened exactly, but the sharp edge of it went somewhere else. "I thought he was careful because he had to be," he said. "I didn't think he was careful on purpose." "Neither did I said honestly. "Not until Zurich." He got into his car and I watched him go. That night I sat at my father's kitchen table alone and reread the trust documents the way you reread a letter you've almost memorized but aren't finished understanding. 6 weeks after the ruling, I drove to Vancouver. Callum's apartment was near Commercial Drive, a neighborhood that suited him, busy and alive. The recycling bin on his porch was overflowing slightly. He answered the door, looking like he'd been expecting me for a while. "I figured you'd come," he said. "I'm not here to win anything," I said. He stepped aside. We sat at his kitchen table the way we'd sat at my father's. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told me. "About the door." "And?" He was quiet for a moment. "I've never been good with money. I've always known that. I just thought Dad didn't know it, or that he thought I'd figure it out." "He knew," I said. "He said in his letter he helped you because he believed in you. Not because he thought you had it figured out." Callum looked away. "The stabilization clause," I said. "It's not about control. It's about what he already started. He cleared your debt twice, quietly. This would just formalize what he was already doing with a plan attached." "Financial counseling," Callum said. "Yes, and a realistic debt reduction timeline. 5 years, not overnight. Distributions tied to benchmarks, not my approval. And if I don't hit the benchmarks, then we revisit together." He looked at me carefully. "You'd really do that? Sit down and revisit it." "He didn't build this so it would end with us," I said. "He built it to go further than us." Callum nodded slowly. Outside, a streetcar went past on the wet road. He asked about Zurich, what it looked like, whether I'd been scared, whether I cried reading the letter. I told him the truth on all three. We spent 2 hours going through numbers. His actual debt load, what a structured approach would look like, what the trust could realistically provide without depleting the principal that supported the other beneficiaries. It wasn't emotional. It was practical. It was exactly what my father would have wanted. When I left, Callum walked me to the door. He never told me he was proud of me, he said. He never told me either, I said. But he trusted me to take care of something he spent 14 years building. That's not the same as love, but it's not nothing. Callum looked down the street. You really think this works? The whole thing? I think he thought in decades, I said. I think I'm starting to. He gave a small nod. The kind that means someone has decided something they haven't said out loud yet. On the flight back to Toronto, I thought about the man at the cemetery. About how he'd known for years, probably that there would be a morning like that one, that the flag would be folded, the ground would be cold, and someone would need to be handed those 7 words before they walked away thinking the story was finished. Go to Zurich. Tell them his name. They'll know what to do. He hadn't been delivering a mystery. He'd been delivering instructions that had been waiting for the right moment, the way my father did everything without announcement, without drama, with complete intention. A year after the dismissal of Callum's petition, we drove to Beechwood together. Not because anyone asked us to. Because it was November, and the date mattered to both of us, and neither of us said that out loud. The headstone looked the same. Clean granite, his name, his rank, his years. No extra inscription. He would have vetoed anything ornate. Callum had been working with a financial counselor in Vancouver for 8 months. He'd sold the motorbike he'd bought impulsively 2 years ago. He'd cancelled 2 credit lines. He hadn't become a different person. He was still the one who talked too much at family dinners and had opinions about everything, but the particular anxiety that used to live just behind his eyes had quieted some. I've been thinking about what he wrote in that letter, Callum said, looking at the stone. That he kept looking for the right time to tell you. What about it? I think he kept looking for the right time to tell me things too, Callum said. I just always made it hard to find. I didn't say anything because he wasn't wrong and he knew it and he didn't need me to confirm it. We stood there until the wind off the Rideau River picked up. Before we left, Callum cleared his throat. I'm glad you went to Zurich, he said. Me too. Even the part where I sued you? Even that part, I said. It's how I knew the structure was real. He laughed once, short and genuine. Dad would have found that funny. He would have found it predictable, I said. We walked back to the car together. The flags along the older section moved in the wind and then went still. That night I sat at my own kitchen table in Toronto, not my father's house, mine, and thought about what he had spent 14 years building. Not wealth, a standard, a way of doing things that didn't require an audience or a plaque. 11 families whose lives were quietly different because of decisions made in a modest Kingston house at 5:45 in the morning by a man drinking black coffee with no one watching. He never asked to be recognized for it. He never mentioned it. He just did it, steadily, for 14 years, until there was no more time. I have a framed print in my office now. Not his medals, he didn't bring those home. Just a piece of paper, printed plainly, with the words he wrote at the bottom of his letter. You don't make noise about helping someone. You just help them. I read it when the work feels like too much. When the oversight feels like a weight rather than a purpose. When I wonder what the point is of managing something that most people will never know exists. And then, I remember the groundskeeper at Beechwood that morning. The cold coming off the water. A man I'd never met handing me a card and 7 words that changed the shape of everything I thought I knew about my father. He didn't die with nothing. He died with everything already in place. If you've ever stood at a graveside and felt like you were only beginning to understand who someone was, I think you know what I mean. The people who leave the most are often the ones who said the least. And sometimes the greatest thing a person can hand you isn't money or property or even answers. Sometimes it's just trust. If that landed somewhere real for you, I'd love to know. Tell me in the comments about someone in your life who was steady instead of loud. And if you're still figuring out what they left behind, don't stop looking.